You're listening to the Women's Hope podcast of the Masters University with Dr. Shelbi Cullen and Kimberly Cummings. Join them as they bring hope and encouragement through 25 years of combined experience in biblical discipleship and counseling as ACBC counselors. Shelbi and Kimberly provide biblical and practical wisdom by coming alongside women with the teaching and resources necessary to grow in the grace and the knowledge of their Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Shelbi, my dear friend, how have you been? I have missed you so much.
Yeah, doing really good. Just trying to get ready for our semester close. There's always some exciting things going on as a teacher, grading, finishing up, just trying to persevere. And I speak for the students as well.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, I had girls over Monday night to bake cookies. And
fun. Yeah. From here to students.
From the school. And it was about 10 university students. And it was so funny. They were like, oh, this was such a nice break from dead week.
Yeah. So, it feels like a dead week. That's true.
That's what
one
they
way
call
to look
it.
At it. Yeah.
That's what, I was like, this is the first day of dead week right there. Like, yeah. So, but tell me, what are your summer plans?
I've never heard that before, dead week. Summer plans. Yeah. So my summer, I think it'll be like I have a couple of speaking engagements. Sean has a big missions trip that he's going on to Ecuador. And I am getting ready to go to Michigan because my baby is having a baby. So just thinking through how long to stay and coordinate all that out. But
what a gift.
I think it's kind of like a chill summer in a lot of ways. I definitely have some reading and writing plans, but that's just stuff I like to do, so I look forward to it. But yeah, I don't know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, family stuff, work stuff, whatever.
And it'll fly, right?
It'll fly.
Yeah.
It'll fly. Oh, gardening is always at the top of the list. Looking forward to getting my hands dirty. I have plans for that space at my house.
Gardening is the best. And you do really well because you have milkweed and butterflies and
all kinds of stuff. But I mean, like the vegetable garden, just
oh sure,
strawberries from last year, but just needing to plant new things. So I'm excited about that. I just got to keep the squirrels out. I am having trouble with keeping those rascals from eating my produce.
Stinky squirrels. Yeah, we have lots of those too. They love to hang out in our backyard and dig holes and put all of the oak tree acorns and bury them. And then I have all these little oak trees come up because they never come back and get them.
That's right.
They must be forgetful squirrels. But anyway,
sure.
So with all that said, we're obviously taking a break from the podcast, right? So, Shelbi, why don't you just get us started with what we are going to be talking about today? And
oh, wait, aren't you going to say what your summer plans are?
Got me. It's somewhat chill, similar to you.
Yeah.
Be preparing for next fall's Bible study. Going to be working through the book of Philippians, and I'm actually going to be working with someone who is going to begin teaching with me.
Nice.
So there's going to be a little bit of discipleship going on, preparation, not just, hunkering down and doing it myself. So that's a unique aspect of getting to do that. Then also, speaking several times and some traveling, I'm also going to follow David to one of his speaking engagements. And then, not even thinking about this, but I want to make a plug for Shepherd's Wives Conference.
Oh, you should. Yeah.
Oh, man. It is in July. And just look up Shepherd's Wives Conference on social media. And you want to be there. I actually heard Ernie Baker's wife said that was the best conference that she had ever been to for women in her life.
Wow.
And so I agree. And I love that I get to just go and soak in solid teaching this summer. So that's in July.
Okay.
And I believe it's the 7th through 9th, but you want to check on that because I'm just doing this off the top of my head, which is always a scary thing.
Yeah, I went to the first one. It's marvelous.
Yeah.
This would be like the third or fourth one, right?
The third one. This is the third one. Yeah.
Susan Heck's doing a good job.
Yeah, Susan and Martha both. Are doing a great job. So you definitely want to sign up for that. I believe they have opened it up to women in general, not just pastors' wives.
So, right. Yeah. The people always ask about that. But from what I understand, it's open. Let's see. I'll look it up. Looks like that would be the case. You can just register July 9th to 11th. Crestwood Baptist Church in Crestwood, Kentucky is where it's located. And looks like they've got a wonderful lineup. And pretty easy. Very, very user-friendly website. So I think it'll be wonderful.
Yeah, you'll definitely want to do that. And if you are there, be sure to look for me. And I'd love to meet you. So anyway, so lots of, little travel, not big travel. We've done our big travel. So
we might have to set up a booth there sometime, Kim.
Ooh, I support. Well, I'm guessing I will see your book there because 316 Publishing will be there.
Oh, good.
So I'm sure your book will be there.
That's really sweet.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Which, if you haven't gotten that, you need to make sure that you get Shelbi's book.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, we're going to be looking at a very unique book of the Bible this episode. I'm very excited about this. I feel like this narrative of all the narratives of all the things I've read about different women, this one's really compelling and it's kind of gripping, and it just, you kind of feel like movie of the week stuff. It's just really compelling. I love it. There are numerous characters, and the name of the main character actually is never mentioned. Main character meaning the Lord, right?
Amen.
And if there's just one book from the Bible that reminds us that so much of what is happening in our lives really has little to do with us, the book that's at the top of the list would be this book. John Piper says, God is always doing 10,000 things in your life, and you may be aware of only 3 of them. And so the book that we're talking about is the book of Esther. And this book is ultimately, really, it is about God and his glory and just how he just faithfully keeps his promise to his chosen people. But it never ceases to amaze me, Kim, how God lovingly allows us to be a part of his grand plan, experiencing the good that he's ordained for us. Psalm 139 tells us that all of our days were ordained by God when there were not yet one of them. But sadly, if we're honest, we can get so caught up in the here and now that we kind of lose sight of a much greater narrative going on, and that, of course, would be God's glory. So this narrative of Esther, it does read like part fairy tale. There is a dash of political conspiracy, see what I mean? Like movie of the week stuff. And then, of course, it's a story that has just good old-fashioned family feuds there thrown in the mix as well. But I think you would agree that it really reads a bit like maybe a sanctified soap opera. That's kind of funny. Funny to say it that way. But it kind of does. When I was rereading it this morning, just to get it really clear in my mind, I was like, there's just so much going on here. This is crazy. But anyway, all the while, when all these crazy things are going on in the narrative itself, there's this aspect where you really sense the loving eye of the Lord and just his hidden hand that he is well at work. He takes acts, the Lord, which, of course, men intend for evil or selfishness. And, of course, he reverses them for the good of his chosen people. We always talk about how the Lord uses all things in our life for our good and his glory. And you really sense that. And in this case, he uses an orphan girl to become queen of an empire in a very pagan land to rescue them from great peril. God does this by defying the culture and by confronting it with his perfect will. And so, listeners, it's really our hope that each of us will just allow this beautiful story of Esther to open our eyes to become gratefully aware that our steadfast Lord is just working, again, all things together for the believer's good. And yes, more importantly, for his glory, really. And so, Kimberly, why don't you introduce us to Esther? It's just a beautiful narrative.
Yeah, I feel like this is a little bit, I think we could call it story time with Kim and Shelbi because, we're going to be running through 10 chapters and it is so unique because God isn't mentioned, but he is there and he is working and he is relentless about saving his people. And so it is such a wonderful book because of the reasons that you mentioned. And we do just want to go over the first 4 chapters of the book in this episode as we look to see God's providential faithfulness to his people. And like you said, it really does read like a real life fairy tale. But this takes place in the Persian Empire. And the Persian Empire was the largest empire that the world had ever seen up to that point. It was home to 40 to 45% of the world's population at its height. And conservative estimates place the total population of the Persian Empire around 20 to 30 million people, okay? And it's estimated that probably about 10% of those were Jewish.
Wow.
They lived throughout the Persian provinces at the time of Esther. Long before Esther, the people of Israel and of Judah had been dispersed throughout the Near East by the Assyrians, by the Babylonians, and eventually the Persians absorbed nearly all of these lands into their empire, which reached to the greatest extent during the time of Esther under the reign of King Xerxes, okay? So the Jews became subjects of the Persian Empire when Cyrus the Great, king of Median Persia, conquered Babylon in 538 BC. Babylon had taken over Judah in 605 BC, and many Jews were deported to Babylon, right? And captives in about 587, 586 BC. And even though Cyrus had issued a decree allowing Jewish captives to return to their homeland, many of them stayed. They had been settled there, and so they were, even some of them, successful. And so they just continued on their practices as a Jewish people in a foreign land. It was allowed in the Persian Empire for them to be allowed to practice their Jewish customs and their religion, and they were accepted in the Persian community, so to speak. So that's what makes this story even more compelling when we see later how Haman twists things for his selfish advantage when they were just doing life in Persia. So this is where our story begins. The scene is set in chapter 1 with King Ahasuerus, which is also King Xerxes, on the throne in Susa, holding this massive banquet in the 3rd year of his reign. This banquet lasted 3 months.
Okay.
I know, that is a shindig, right?
Yeah.
He is throwing the party of all parties. He is bringing out all of his wealth for everyone attending to see, wealth that we get to see in museums today. But it says in chapter 1, verse 4, he displayed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor of his great majesty for many days, 180 days. This 180-day show and tell of this mighty empire then turned into a more local extravaganza, because most commentators believe that a caravan went around the whole empire for these 3 months, showing this whole empire, right? And then brought it in more locally to the citadel at Susa. And this is where this party begins. And I'm even going to be posting some images on our Facebook group so you can really get a good picture of the area, because so much of it is preserved.
Wow.
And you can actually see the foundation of the citadel. And so when you're reading the story, it all starts falling together as you get that visual picture. And I'm a visual learner, and so I just love that. So anyway, so now they're at this 7-day banquet, okay? And not only is King Ahasuerus holding a banquet, but his wife, Queen Vashti, is hosting a banquet for the women in the king's palace.
So they had separate banquets.
They had one for the girls, one for the boys, okay? And 7 days into this banquet, the king calls for his eunuchs to bring Queen Vashti before the men at his banquet, wearing her crown to display her beauty. And it just says, wearing her crown.
Oh.
That's all it says. So we can't read too much, but we also can't read too little into it. So anyway, she is to display her beauty, but she refuses the king's command.
Kind of makes it seem like that probably was what we're thinking then.
Yeah. And most commentators will say that it was happening. Something quite lewd. So, which is gross, but
it's a reality for culturally speaking, huh?
Culturally speaking, this was not an unusual thing to show off the beauty of a
woman,
of the women, period. But anyway, she refuses, and he is not happy about this. And verse 12 says in chapter 1, the king became very angry, and his wrath burned within him. So here we see, ironically, in this story, that the king, who's in control of the largest world empire at the time, is not able to manage his own marriage. Can you imagine the embarrassment?
Yeah.
So all the king's advisors gather, and they basically figure out damage control. And this leads to Queen Vashti being dethroned via a royal edict or decree. And we know at the time these decrees the decrees of the Medes and the Persians could not be repealed. Okay. And that is very, very important in the storyline.
Okay.
Anytime a decree went out, it's going to happen. Okay. It cannot be taken back. So this is known, like I said, the law of the Medes and the Persians. And this decree went out through the entire empire. And in verse 19, it says that the king was to give her, being Vashti, royal position to another who is more worthy than she. And that all the women were to give honor to their husbands, and the men master their own house. So we even see that the value of men being the leaders of the home, even though it wasn't displayed from the throne, was a priority. So ladies, this is really providence, right? God is allowing Vashti to be dethroned years before the danger of the Jews' annihilation for his purposes. God sees the end from the beginning, and he is working accordingly. So, Shelbi, take us to chapter 2, where we get to see another incident, which will lead us to see how God is providentially working on this great rescue mission of God's chosen people.
Wow. That's a lot going on there, but thanks, Kim. That's just a lot and just really informative. I really appreciate just the whole narrative. It's just fun to kind of think through this, culturally speaking too. But what we know as we get into chapter 2, the king's anger has now subsided since all of that happened. And it's now time along with his advisors, to suggest the process of finding a new queen. So this new process is going to begin now. And it's notable in the story that it's not so much an audition for the queen, but leaders are now seeking and gathering every beautiful woman, specifically beautiful young virgins throughout the entire region, for the king to choose the next queen through another questionable practice. So it's kind of funny because last time we studied Ruth together, right? And in Ruth, we saw her approach Boaz, still in a culturally odd kind of a way. But here we see another culturally unusual practice, to the American reader anyway. But of course, this would be a pagan practice. So in the book of Ruth, instead of a threshing floor, which we saw there, in this narrative, we see harems that are filled with women who are given and taken from their provinces, and they're given the royal treatment just to prepare them to spend one night with the king so that he can make this decision of who was going to be the next queen. Yeah. So this is where it gets increasingly interesting, if we didn't think it was interesting enough, to the reader anyway. We're now seeing God's providence unfold. So In verse 5 of chapter 2, we are introduced to Mordecai, the Jew. Now, Mordecai had been exiled from Jerusalem under King Nebuchadnezzar, and he was now in the citadel of Susa, and meaning that you can tell from the text and the way that it's worded that he had some sort of position there. In verse 7, we also learned that he's raising his younger cousin, who is Esther, and he's raising her as his own daughter because apparently her parents had died. And so as the women are being gathered, the text tells us that Esther was actually taken to the king's palace as one of the young virgins gathered to prepare to possibly become the next queen. But as we're going to learn, Esther was just special. I mean, she seemed to find favor with Haggai, who was in charge of all the young virgins that were being brought in. And he gave Esther special treatment, giving her cosmetics and choice maids, along with the best palace in the harem for this really long process, approximately 6 months. That's amazing.
That's a spa day.
That is a definite good spa day. But this was their process, preparing these women to possibly be the next queen. All the while, Esther, though, she's not divulging that she's actually a Jewish orphan. Okay, so it's here that Mordecai is able to keep a watch on Esther throughout this whole process. And Esther gained further favor in the eyes of all that saw her. So she just had, it sounds like just a really incredible character that a lot of people would take notice of her. It probably went beyond the external beauty. There's some character. By the time we get to verse 17, the royal crown had been placed on Esther's head as the king, it says the king loved Esther more than all of the other women. So he saw some specialness in her. She definitely found favor with him. But at this point, she's still not divulging her ethnicity at all. And that was because she had received some advice from her uncle Mordecai not to do that. So here we have Esther. She's immersed in this pagan culture. I mean, talk about chaotic times. She's at the highest level. She's been made queen. And she's just trusting her older cousin in this foreign, and he's an older cousin. So when I said Uncle Mordecai, I know that he's her cousin, but she probably would have seen him more like an uncle. But anyway, she's just trusting him in this foreign and by some standards, just really privileged process. And so, you know, as far as God's providence goes, we understand here that the Lord just allowed Esther to be taken as an orphan to be a queen. I mean, that's pretty incredible if you think about it. It's not really based on anything she did, sounds like.
No.
But it's just God's providential favor that's at work in this process. And then we see another providential occurrence in chapter 2 as Mordecai learns of two of the king's guards by the names of Bigthan and Teresh. They were plotting to kill the king, apparently. They were just having this discussion, and Mordecai overheard it. And so he tells Esther, who tells the king, and then she just basically informs him that there's this murderous plot going on in Mordecai's name. And so, unfortunately, the men meant their demise, and they were immediately hung. And it is written in the book of the Chronicles in the king's presence, as a matter of fact, at the end of chapter 2. And that is the last we hear of Mordecai's plot prevention. Or is it? Dun, 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 dun.
Da, 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 da. Or is it indeed? Thank you, Shelbi. There is so much there. And I would encourage the women to do a study just even on the theme of favor because what...
Great idea.
And even culturally, what the women would do to seek favor, you do not see that Esther does any of those things.
Yeah, that's true. Because he does often say up to half my kingdom and later, yeah.
Yeah, so it's very interesting that she's not seeking after that, but it's being shown to her. Yet all the while, the women are doing things and using things to receive favor, but never got the favor, and she got it. And so you just see God at work. But anyway, Thank you, Shelbi. We want you to study this book because I think it will help you to become a better providential thinker. So we're in chapter 3. We're introduced to a new character, and he is a character indeed. We actually did a skit of the story Esther last night, and it was so hilarious because Haman actually ended up being, I called him Hammond because he was a ham in the skit.
But prideful ham.
Yeah, very much so. But anyway, this is Haman that is introduced, and it just makes a quick statement saying that the king happens to be an Agagite, okay? And this is not just a casual mention of someone's heritage. We have to go back approximately 500 years to 1 Samuel 15 to remember who Agag is. And we know this story, but I'm going to just give a little bit of review because it really plays in to how Esther plays out at the end. And it's so fascinating. And in all of my times of reading the book of Esther, I had never caught this because sometimes we just read it as a story quickly and we don't catch the nuances.
That's true.
So, and when you mentioned Family Feud, this is what we're talking about here. Yeah. But Samuel, who had anointed Saul over Israel, had been given instruction from God to kill Amalek in verse 3, saying, "Now go and strike Amalek and utterly destroy all he has. And do not spare him, but put to death both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey." That's a lot of words for everything.
Yeah.
Get rid of it all.
That's right.
Get rid of them all the people, everything.
Utterly destroy it, yeah.
Utterly means everything. So what actually happened? Did Saul obey? Well, in 1 Samuel, we see that he did not. We learn instead he captured, not killed, captured Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. So he did not kill Agag, the king. But instead, he spared him and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and all that was good.
Didn't Samuel say, "What is that bleeding?
What is that bleeding? Isn't that hilarious?" Yeah. That is so, I can see a parent with a child, right? When they've done something naughty.
Like the best biblical counselor ever.
Oh, yes. So good. But anyway, so Saul spared Agag and all the goods, right? And Saul confronts him. Fascinating story made short. Samuel tells Saul to bring Agag to him. Bring Agag here, right? And Saul did, and Samuel hewed or cut, right? That word hewed means cut, Agag to pieces before the Lord. Wow. Samuel meant business.
Yeah.
Right? He informed Saul that his sin has grave consequence as he has now been rejected as king.
Yeah.
So now fast forwarding to Esther, one of Agag's descendants, or an Amalekite, okay, is now the right-hand man of the king of all of Persia, where unbeknownst to him, 2 Jews, right, are in prominent positions until Mordecai is seen not bowing or paying homage to Haman. And this enrages Haman, and he takes this matter before the king, convincing him, basically offering a bribe, large sums of money or silver, and tells him, hey, there's a people group within Persia that do not have the king's interest at heart. So first of all, he lies, right? They're just going about their business.
Yeah.
He's just got
They're obeying the king.
Yes, they're obeying the king. They're not causing any problem. Haman just has a beef with Mordecai.
Yeah. because he's prideful. He wouldn't bow down to him.
Exactly. And it enraged him. And so he twists what's really going on for his own benefit. And he suggests to the king that all this people group be destroyed. So the king basically says, keep your money, do whatever you wish with these people, and hands Haman his signet ring and gives this ring, which when you hand the signet ring, that's power. So prideful Haman now has incredible power. So he has the signet ring, and he's giving him the authority over the kingdom to make those edicts that cannot be repealed, right?
That's right.
So, gotta love politics, Shelbi. If you ever are discouraged with our political scene, just read Esther because it shows that God is sovereign over politics. So anyway, Haman uses his power to declare an edict, according to verse 13, that it was sent by couriers to all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar. And they were to seize their possessions as plunder. Wow. Such pride and hatred with grave consequence is on display in this passage, Shelbi. Haman's hatred for one man not bowing brings the threat of destruction to God's chosen people. This scenario sounds so familiar to that of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, doesn't it? When the fiery furnace, they were thrown in the fiery furnace for not bowing to King Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 3. So a lot of similarities there. So while the king and Haman are just sitting down to have a drink of wine after this decree to annihilate a whole people group, millions of people, the people of Susa were now in a state of confusion. And this people group were not causing a problem within Persia. And they were allowed to follow their own customs and practices. So this just did not make sense. So Shelbi, the story is getting more intense.
Yes, it is.
The drama is building. I wish we had sound effects here.
No.
So take us through chapter 4, friend, and just tell us where we are as we see Mordecai and Esther take action.
Yeah, and maybe reacting too, right? Because basically, as you get to chapter 4, you see that Mordecai is actually in great anguish over this. I mean, this is just a terrible result, the terrible problem that Haman has caused, really. And in Jewish fashion, when one is grieved and just ripped to the heart, we see Mordecai tearing his clothes. He's now in sackcloth and ashes. He's wailing loudly and bitterly over this decision that Haman and the king made to kill every Jew in the Persian Empire. You can just, I think, if you put yourself in his shoes, you can identify with how he's feeling, because this is huge. This is big, and this mourning, if you will, has definitely spread throughout all of Persia. There's fasting, there's weeping, there's wailing. And lots of people, doing sackcloth and ashes. So they're just in pain. So finally, as you kind of read on, you understand that Esther's maidens explain to Esther all that's happened. And so Esther sends one of the king's eunuchs just to kind of investigate what's going on, go find Mordecai so we can understand what's happening here. And then Mordecai just sends word back and even a copy of the edict to Esther to implore her, just for her to take a stand before the king and maybe plead on behalf of her kindred, her people. And it gets a little bit dicey because, I think, in humanly speaking, Esther knows that you can't really approach the king in the inner court unless you're summoned. right? Mm-hmm. That must have been so hard. And that included Esther, even though she had found favor and was queen and all of that. There's still a sort of a protocol here. In fact, if you aren't summoned, the way it worked is if you were not, you would be put to death, basically, if the king didn't hold this golden scepter out to the person. And so we already know that the king is a hothead, so this could go sideways super quick, right?
Easily.
We already saw that in the beginning. He sounds like he's probably just a difficult person in that sense.
Too many glasses of wine. It could go bad fast. Yeah.
But the thing is, even so, we see Mordecai really calling Esther just to be courageous, Even so, take courage, go before the king, and he informs Esther that if she won't do it, there's going to be grave consequences, and probably someone else will. And so I think Mordecai is giving us a glimpse of his trust and a great understanding, wisdom here of God's covenant care of his people without maybe expressing those words expressly. And so we know that Esther's life is in peril. Well, Mordecai's life is in peril. And the life of every Jew in the largest empire of the world is in peril. And then we hear those well-known words to the believer's ears in verse 14. And who knows whether you've not attained royalty for such a time as this, or like a challenge, who knows? And so Esther, she doesn't cower. She doesn't give in to her fear. I think that's a really important thing to see. She really doesn't. She actually rises to the occasion, and she does something pretty wonderful. I mean, I always think about this. Before we make a big decision, do we take time to fast? Because she fasted for 3 days.
And called others to do that with her.
Yeah, and called others to do it on in all of Susa on her behalf. Even the maidens that were in the chambers with her. And so she commits to go before the king, even though she realizes, this may cost my life. That's pretty incredible. She is willing to break the law and go before the king. And chapter 4 closes with Esther boldly proclaiming, if I perish, I perish. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. That's amazing courage from just an orphan, huh?
Yeah.
An orphan that has just risen to this prominent position.
Right. Yeah. And, Shelby, there's a lot of debate on Esther's faith because we never see a direct call upon or much less mention of God's name in this book. But again, God is giving us a glimpse of a couple of things. We see resolute courage in the face of likely death. Esther doesn't jump to a decision without calling to the aid of others, her kindred, her maidens, and her cousin, all, like you said, all of Susa, right? To fast. She shows all in her sphere of influence deep humility because she doesn't just act first. She waits, right? And she fasts. And so many were called to action through a humble, dependent fast for 3 nights and days before even making a move. Biblical courage, ladies, does not mean we act independently or in an uncalculated manner. Her courage is reliant upon something, rather someone greater than herself as she plans to move forward. I love what C.S. Lewis said. He said, courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point. I thought that was really good because courage shows what you are made of.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
So another commentator said, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Consensus asks the question, is it popular? Courage asks the question, is it right? And this is what we have seen with Mordecai. He does what is right in reporting the 2 men, right?
Yeah.
That are plotting against the king.
Right.
And outs them, even though that could have caused him a problem. and gets no credit for it, but he does it anyway. He did what was right. But we also see Esther in this very vulnerable position, listening to her cousin who has shown care for her as his own child. He has given her counsel up to now to not share her identity as a Jew. And even though she's in danger, she trusts Mordecai's wisdom and command to act and is willing to do so. And I just think that that's such a beautiful picture there. And I'm guessing that that relationship was built long before, right? Because he had already cared for her as an orphan.
Yeah.
And so now that trust that she's put in to him as a cousin, really older, like you said.
Like a father figure, uncle.
Is being played out in a very instrumental way. And so, ladies, can I just ask, when is the last time you called out for others to act on your behalf? When you are going through a really hard time, do you have a group of people that you call out to pray for you, to allow to enter into your suffering?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Into your danger even.
Yeah.
Or how about just your day-to-day? Will you pray for me? I really don't know if I can change another dirty diaper, right? If we just want to take it to the day-to-day. Because we live in such an individualistic society, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
So reliance upon others is often considered a sign of weakness. But to the Christian, it is biblical to have the body of Christ coming alongside us, and it shows humility. And so faithful courage doesn't mean we act haphazardly. We don't check out mentally, but instead we contemplate biblically what we know to be true, and we trust in the Lord with all of our heart. We don't lean on our own understanding. In all our ways, we acknowledge God, knowing He will make our path straight. That is faithful day-to-day courage. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. So, where are you, our dear listeners? Where do you need to show faithful courage? Where may you not be trusting the Lord wholeheartedly? Maybe you need to speak to a spiritually hostile neighbor about Christ. Maybe you're afraid. Obedience in the midst of hostility may be fearful. But I want to close with this quote for this episode. And I want you to picture with me, and you've probably seen the picture. If you haven't, it's a beautiful picture, but it's Elizabeth Elliot taking a canoe down the river with her toddler, blonde, very pale daughter into hostile territory to the very people who killed her husband.
Yeah.
And 3 others. And she is going to share the gospel with this people group. And she says this. She says, sometimes when we are called to obey, the fear does not subside. And we are expected to move against that fear. One must choose to do it afraid.
It's incredible.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. I love that. One must choose to do it afraid. What a great line.
Do it anyway.
Do it anyway.
What is right.
And that's a good picture of Esther, actually. She had to have been afraid. She was just a young woman, but she chose to do what was right. And I'm sure she was afraid. I'm sure she was. You mentioned Proverbs 3, 5 to 6, but I actually want to leave our listeners with one last passage from Proverbs 3, and this is 25 to 26, which says, do not be afraid of sudden fear, nor of the onslaught of the wicked when it comes, for the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being caught. And so, ladies, do you want to grow in courage? I know I do.
I do.
I want to grow in courage, and I trust that you do too. And so to do so, I think it first starts with wanting to grow maybe in humble acceptance of the foreknowledge and sovereign will of God. In other words, your view of God needs to grow. You need to see Him as such. And that's going to help you to become, all of us to become providential thinkers. We will resolve to trust that God's plans and purposes cannot be thwarted, and that his omnipotence makes every situation of life obedient to his perfect will, even those who are evil. Makes me think of Psalm 73, actually, because we live this side of heaven, and there's evil all around. And yet, when we fear the Lord, how do you fight fear? You fight fear with fear, right? Fear of man with fear of the Lord. Amen. When we fear the Lord, we will fear little else. And so when we trust that Christ has faithfully led the way, even though it requires death on a cross, we can follow in humble, dependent faith in the one who ran the race before us. Wow, that's a lot. So I know we have to bring this to a close today, but, Kim, as we close, I really want to just take the time to thank the Masters University for producing Women's Hope.
So thankful.
We're so thankful. Their support has meant so much to us over the years. And we also want to thank you, our listeners, who just takes the time to learn with us. We love learning with you. And with that, we actually look forward to our next episode so that we can finish up this incredible narrative. It's like a cliffhanger here. What happens? But with that, ladies, we just want to wish you all the best, and also to just say, have a courageous day.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Hope podcast of the Masters University. For more resources and episodes, visit masters.edu/women's hope. For more information on the Masters University, visit masters.edu. We'll see you next time.